I titled today's mind map here, Clipping Impossible Out. So this conversation is built on the foundation of our last few videos in which we've been speaking of what we are saying I am to, which is revealed via our proactivity or reactivity. Now we zoned into reactivity and we connected it over to what we learned from the book The Kabbalion in the principle of polarity. So we're looking at it from the perspective of what are we polarizing to? What we are polarizing to is a lot of times conjuring up in our imagination certain scenes or thought processes or inner dialogues that changes our state of mind. We go into different states of mind. As a result of changing these states of mind, we experience reality from those states of mind. And we could look at this reality that we experience from either internal locus of control or external locus of control, again, both discussed in the last few videos. I'll put links in the description. I want to weave this into a story about some experiences that I had a number of years ago when I really started to understand this concept of polarity. What am I polarizing to? And what my state of mind is as a result of what I am polarizing to. I used to do a lot of events, and I used to find that in certain events I was in the flow. I found myself very relatable with people, very connected one with. I would find the conversations would be very smooth. I would feel very connected with people, and it would feel so one with, and I would not feel any degree of separation. I also found that there were certain times where I would go to these events, and I would experience a higher degree of reactivity. I would experience states of mind in which it would play out in theater as where people would feel very resistant towards me. I would notice that I would feel more needy. I was trying more. The conversations didn't seem to flow. They seemed very jarring, and it was an unpleasant experience. I didn't feel one with. Upon reflection and working with this information, I realized that I was, prior to going into those interactions, wearing certain states of mind, certain garments of mind. And it was playing itself out in theater, and it was really based on what I was imagining prior to going into these interactions about these interactions. If I imagined and I identified that things were going to go well and things were going to work out and I was going to have certain experiences, positive expectation, the theater would play out in the interactions with people from that state of mind. If, for whatever the reason may be, I saw disconnect in others, felt frustration within me, which conjured up in my imagination certain scenes of how theater would play out in those interactions, from a place of lack or disconnect, I would go down the thread and have those same experiences. It then further brought me into a deeper level of understanding of one of my favorite quotes from Think and Grow Rich, which I would like to discuss further and weave it into the story that I just shared with you and our recent discussions. And the quote is as follows. A great many years ago, I purchased a fine dictionary. The first thing that I did with it was turn to the word impossible and neatly clip it out of the book. That would not be an unwise thing for you to do. In the Bible, another one of my favorite passages is when Jesus said, "If thou canst believe, all things are possible to him that believeth." For some reason, we seem to have identified with certain thinking of impossibility. And what we want to do is, more so every day, clip it out of our relations that we're having with people, environment, the day-to-day experiences on the journey to bringing forth our vision. The fundamental reason why is because if we believe that things are possible, we are going to see the possibilities and go down the thread and have those experiences from that belief. If we believe things are impossible in relation to our vision, either our vision or some aspect related to our vision, we will find ourselves automatically polarizing to certain aspects of reality in which we will interpret those aspects from the perspective of impossible, forgetting to realize in that moment, based on the reactivity, that the power is within, and we exercise this power based on what we are thinking, what we are inner dialoguing, what we are imagining in relation to what we are going to do. And also, since we were bringing up the Kabbalion, and I would like to further bring it up and weave it into future discussions, because I found the book to be very insightful in helping me make sense of what was going on internally, as well as my relationship from the internal to the external. And I'm going to bring up this particular quote here, which I tend to say a lot. And I found it to be one of the most fascinating as well as the most revealing as far as understanding goes. And the quote states, "Everything is and isn't at the same time." Everything is and isn't at the same time. So let's go back to my story. I went into an event. When I flipped it over to a different perspective, and I actually began to practice this consciously. And if you have the ability to do so, you can try it and see what happens, where you imagine yourself going into a room with a internal locus of control based perspective and observe how people relate to you in that room or that event. And then switch it. Leave the room, identify with an imaginal scene from the perspective of the opposite of that, go into the room and observe how people relate to you. Because we believe it's possible to have either experience, whether it's one of harmony or disharmony. And then we can actually identify with that state of mind and have the respective experience of our conscious choosing. Generally, we'll tend to pick the experience that would be ideal. So let's get further into discussion. We want to turn the word impossible into possibility in relation to the different experiences that we have on the day-to-day journey to bring forth our vision. Because as we do so, we identify and experience reality from those states of mind. Now, I also brought this up in the last video, in which I mentioned from a Myers-Briggs perspective, I generally identify more so with ENTJ, and the J referring to judging. On the flip side of that, we have perceiving. One of the things that I've gotten better at is to enhance and develop my perceiving ability, my ability to perceive more. And it is because I started to integrate more so what was suggested in Think and Grow Rich. Again, let's go back and echo it. A great many years ago, I purchased a fine dictionary. The first thing I did with it was to turn to the word impossible and neatly clip it out of the book. It would not be an unwise thing for you to do. So by more so clipping out the word impossible in relation to different aspects of the journey, I began to identify more with possibility. And it reminded me, when I was putting together this mind map, on a quote that I learned many years ago. Actually, I read this book when I was 15 years old, The Magic of Thinking Big. And although I formally started this journey, I would say in 2004 with Think and Grow Rich, when I was in $50,000 debt, and the book not only helped me get out of debt, but helped me buy my first house and lay the foundation for the future successes as a result of working with the information contained within. If I rewind back, I remember actually reading this book right here, which helped me in earlier stages of my journey as well, called The Magic of Thinking Big. And the quote states, "Some of the most practical success-building wisdom is found in that biblical quotation stating that faith can move mountains. Believe, really believe you can move a mountain, and you can. Not many people believe that they can move mountains, so as a result, not many people do." Now, in relationship with our recent videos, we want to observe a degree of polarization to this idea that faith can move mountains. Because the degree of polarization of that particular statement, if it brings forth disempowering external locus of control based reactivity thinking, is going to reveal the exact programming that we're going to want to change as a result of the subconscious mind work. Because it can be challenging for some people to believe that they have the ability to move mountains in relation to their vision. But as they begin to meditate and integrate this particular quote using the subconscious mind work, what they will then find is the release of the judgment, and more so a acceptance of the potentialities or possibilities to move the mountains in relation to the vision. Let's go back to that story I shared with you. It was very important to me, and it still is very important to me. Wherever I go, when I connect with people in the day-to-day journey, the entrepreneurial journey, to be relatable so I can identify the ideal clients, prospects, build relationships with them, connect with team members, vendors in a flow-based way so that we could create a mutual win-win-win outcome that will allow us to excel our business initiatives in a mutually beneficial way. This idea or that affirmation is further stimulated by the understanding that it is possible. And if I went into the interactions and didn't believe it was possible, I would find myself having a conversation or a dialogue which is a result of that state of mind, the theater that plays out from that perspective, which I would then call disharmony. So when you believe something is possible, your mind goes to work for you to prove why it's possible or how it's possible and so forth. As he also states further in The Magic of Thinking Big, but when you believe, really believe something can be done, your mind goes to work for you and helps you find the ways to do this. So another way of saying this is we want to raise our level of awareness. We want to be more aware, which is why I suggest that we consume and we surround ourselves with information that reveals potentiality, possibility. As I had mentioned in the earlier stages of my entrepreneurial journey, I used to listen to podcasts whenever I would travel from my office to the client site as much as I can, because I was listening to individuals who would speak of different potentialities and possibilities and different ways of bringing forth success. And I would open up my own mind to the potentiality of integrating with those possibilities. As I became more open-minded of the array of perspectives that are available in relation to bringing forth success, I found myself more identified with the potentialities in relation to possibility. And I would find myself disentangled from certain thinking in relation to the impossible perspective. Going back to our quote here, neatly clipping out of the book can be looked at as neatly clipping it out of consciousness. So again, awareness, if you look at it, the textbook definition, is a state of being conscious of something. More specifically, it is the ability to directly know and perceive, to feel, or to be cognizant of events. So we are aware because we are alive. If you're watching this video, you are aware. And what we also want to do is dimensionalize that awareness by seeing more perspectives as a result of releasing from certain thinking that seems to encourage the word impossible and identify more with the word possible. Because this ideal state of mind, the ability to maintain the ideal state of mind, is found in our ability to identify if we have left that state of mind based on what we are thinking, what we are imagining, and what we are doing. And to further help us understand that most of this is subconscious, we work with the principle of polarity from the Kybalion, which is essentially identifying what we are reactive to. If you find yourself being reactive to a certain conversation, a certain experience, a certain aspect of an environment, it's important to reflect upon the reactivity, and identify the meaning we are associating, or the perspective we are identifying with, or the belief that we have, the interpretation, the assumption that we are identifying with, for whatever the reason may be, a lot of times unconsciously, and a lot of times programmed based on childhood experiences, and change this programming around so that we can automatically identify with the accurate perspective in relation to possibility to bring forth our vision. Here's an important thing to realize when it comes to thinking. Thought reflects as parallel. So what this means is, let's go back to my example. I had a certain experience where I would go into an event and I would flip it into two different states of mind, consciously so, to test it out. They were the same people. It was the same location. I would leave the room and change my state of mind and go back into the room, and I would notice that people would communicate with me differently. And then I would flip it into a different state of mind. One would be an internal locus of control, in which I would say people are harmoniously relatable with me. And then as an experiment, I would flip it into a different state of mind, identify with it, in which I would say there's going to be friction in these conversations. There's going to be disconnects in these conversations. And then I would enter the room and I would experience it from those two different states of mind. Thought seems to some way, somehow, based on how we relate to ourselves in relation to the people, environment, circumstance, and information, translate over to, as we go over back to the Kabbalion here, everything is and isn't at the same time. It transcends space and time to play out as the experience. Now, this is something that was discussed all throughout our discussions as we've been going into the Neville Goddard information, into the Master Key system, into the Kabbalion, and many other mystical interpretations of how reality works. And it's important to integrate these perspectives because one of the most mystical, pinnacle level of awareness, thought process, is that faith can move mountains. So there are a few books that I find to be very instrumental on this journey when it comes to further realizing and integrating what we've been discussing. And they are Power versus Force and Letting Go by David Hawkins. Well, we want to make sure that we are identifying more so with, which will be a result of changing a lot of impossibility-based programming in relation to different aspects of the journey, which again ties back into our recent discussion, where we talk about the first-class concept of self, identifying more so with the first-class concept of self. That means seeing reality more so based on programming, thinking, interpretations that are in harmony with your vision, possibility-based thinking, as well as seeing yourself in harmony with people, environment, circumstance, and information, such as saying that people accept you, people appreciate you, that you're able to see possibility, that things do work out. These kinds of beliefs are expressions of a concept of self that is fixed on more so a acceptance-based level of consciousness, he says here, energy level 350. And three important aspects in relation to this level of acceptance, I recommend reading the book, is, he says, at this level of awareness, a major transformation takes place, with the understanding that one is both the source and creator of the experience of one's own life. Taking such responsibility is distinctive of this degree of evolution, characterized by the capacity to live harmoniously with the forces of life. So as we continue this internal evolutionary process, this internal pathway to higher degrees of realization based on purification of the mind by releasing the inaccurate thinking, interpretations, assumptions, and beliefs about ourselves in relation to, as well, people, environment, circumstance, and information, we find ourselves more in this acceptance-based state of mind. And from this acceptance state of mind, we notice that we accept ourselves. We accept others more. We understand even more, as it is characterized here, what he says, The individual at this level of acceptance isn't interested in determining right or wrong, but instead is dedicating to resolve issues, and we can add to this by saying within themselves, as we've been discussing, that we change in consciousness first. So when we identify with the acceptance-based consciousness, we're not interested in the argumentations of the intellect, but rather in the reconciliation and resolution within, or making peace within. He also says, and we want to tie this in very nicely, and it synchronistically showed up as I was skimming through the book today. He says, at this level of acceptance, we're not polarized by conflict or opposition. Speaking of polarity, as we've been discussing in the last few videos, I recommend watching them and integrating them, more importantly, because to understand the principle of polarity conceptually can be helpful. However, by practicing it, by observing what we are saying I am to subconsciously via what we are polarizing to, changing our interpretations in regards to what we are polarizing to, if we would like to, if we need to, for whatever the reason may be. And then as a result of going into that same experience or interacting with that same element in reality, what we notice is that we are not polarized to that. And what we'll find is we automatically more so polarize to what is in harmony and in contribution to our vision. This holds the key to changing the consciousness so that we can maintain a higher degree of focus and awareness rather than being distracted, or as we've been discussing, polarized to certain aspects of reality in which we label it as distraction, knowing that these interpretations of what we are polarizing to is found within ourselves. And when we change this programming within ourselves, what we are relating to also changes based on these changes within ourselves. So we then understand further what he suggests. He says, at this level of acceptance, we're not polarized by conflict or opposition. So again, weaving this all the way to the beginning here, we have to first believe that this is possible. When I first read this quote in Think and Grow Rich, I found a high degree of reactivity towards it, because I thought it was impossible that someone could, within consciousness, clip out the word impossible in relation to different aspects of the journey. Now, upon reflection of working with this information and bringing forth many different results in multiple areas of my life and continuing this journey, I realized that what I was doing on the journey was changing the word impossible, clipping it out and replacing it with the word possible. And going back to what I mentioned, that I tend to identify more with ENTJ, J being judging. Now further integrating the flip side of judging, which we call perceiving, to a higher degree, I'm able to see more potentiality, not be overwhelmed by it, and find myself automatically identifying with the accurate possibility-based perspective on the journey to bringing forth my vision. Now, all of this is a result of practicing a higher degree of acceptance. Acceptance of where you are, and acceptance of the idea that you can replace the word impossible for many things that you identify the word impossible to, thus saying I am to those things, and replace it with the word possible, or can be done, or something like that. And so the way we practice this is to observe where we are using the word impossible and ask ourselves, is this really true in relation to whatever it is that we're working on, or whatever it is that we're doing, or whatever it is that we're experiencing? And say, what if it could be possible? Maybe there is a potentiality. What we notice is that a few things end up happening, some way, somehow, and this is where we want to practice a higher degree of awareness to see when this happens. Information seems to show up that seems to reveal or further affirm that particular potentiality, the possibility. It could show up in a book, it could show up in this video, it could show up in a conversation. It could show up as a hunch or inspiration in your own mind's eye, in which you will probably automatically identify and actually see that potentiality or possibility play out as reality. Now let's go ahead and conclude this with an affirmation. We can say, I realize that I have the ability to rise up to higher levels of awareness, to bring myself into a state of mind what feels natural and in harmony to my vision, based on my ability to understand that all things are possible in relation to my vision. I find myself more identified with the idea of potentiality, possibility. As a result, I'm able to see through the day-to-day experiences the different information that reveals the reflection of this possibility. I find myself easily able to maintain a way of thinking and a perspective that seems to create more flow and a higher degree of acceptance on the journey to bringing forth my vision. I realize that I am both the source and the creator of my experience, and I'm able to harmoniously work with the forces of life to bring forth my vision from a place of harmony and acceptance. As a result, I focus on the ideal automatically in relation to my vision. I find myself polarizing to what is in harmony and in contribution to my vision. Upon reflection of what I react to, I see it as an opportunity. Through these realizations, I recognize how everything is and isn't at the same time. Upon reflection, I realize that thought traverses time and space and reflects accordingly as the reality. Thus, I consciously identify with the thought processes that bring forth my vision from the perspective of love and flow. I'm able to look beyond and move the self-imposed mountains, thus allowing them to move on their own to bring forth my vision from a place of love, harmony, and flow. If you would like a copy of this mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.